Adam Soos here for Rebel News. We are at Canyon Meadows Cinemas here in Calgary, Alberta, for the world premiere of our documentary, Church Under Fire, Canada's War on Christianity. This is the definitive retelling and account of the ongoing persecution and prosecution of Christians and Christian pastors that took place throughout COVID-19. Tonight I'm going to have the opportunity to speak with many of the people who were involved in the production and creation of this film, as well as speaking with some of the people who've decided to come out to this premiere to garner their perspectives.
I think it's important as a non-Christian to make this documentary and to tell this story because, and it may sadden people to hear this, that I took a lot of Bible quotes out. I took a lot of the God out of it in a sense to where someone who's not Christian could watch this and see that it was the worst thing to happen to our civil liberties in Canada.
My church closed. A Catholic church that said 800 people closed and limited to just 10. The only people who went to church were the people who didn't know how to use YouTube. It was just old people. My young, thriving church died just like that.
And this film is really, really important, not just during times of COVID, during the lockdowns, but this film is important to get it out there that we need to stand up for our children, we need to stand up for our grandchildren.
God, not everyone was tested in the way these two were, but everyone here decided to do a little something, and together, I think you made a big difference. It's not up to you to save the world, but neither are you free to do nothing. And the people in this room, you know, not everyone is in the position you were in, where you were the key decision makers. It was down to you to fill the gap.
In a vast land of untamed beauty, hidden within its borders lie stories of unwavering faith and resilience. When the world was engulfed in fear,
COVID-19, which is causing all of the concern right now,
pastors faced an unimaginable trial. They were wrongfully persecuted during the COVID-19 pandemic, their voices silenced by oppressive measures.
And we realized something doesn't match up.
All right, so what did you think of the film?
It was historic, is what it was. Historic and monumental for the world, and most importantly Canada, because everybody else needs to know that if it's happening here, it's coming for you.
I thought it was amazing. I thought it was everything we needed to see. You know, like, too many people don't know what's going on, and sorry. Yeah, I thought it was really good. I didn't want to cry, but I'm at a loss for words, honestly. You know, like, I'm just so proud of everything you guys put together, and you know, I wish my parents would see something like this, but you know, I just think it was perfect. As dark as it was important, and everybody needs to see it.
It was amazing. Not fun, not, I had to wipe tears many times because of the anger and the pain, those little kids. But it was powerful, really powerful.
I really enjoyed it. I like to see all the pastors that stood up because I didn't know about all of them. I do go to Pastor Archer's church. And I guess one of the things I did want to say there was that I didn't go to church until this happened, and I heard Pastor Archer because I didn't know what church was one that I could go to.
Just overwhelming and actually very amazing. That story needs to get out. I'm glad I came. I was kind of hesitant, and I was going to come tomorrow night, but I couldn't. So I said, well, I have to go tonight. Hopefully I didn't miss tickets, and just amazing. Like, I guess I do have a Christian background, but don't really profess to it, I guess. But this is the start of something that needs to be done, and let's just stop the insanity that's going on in the world, really. And this is just a small step, and we just need to continue that fight.
I think that film was really eye-opening, and it was an excellent reminder of where we have been. And I think that more and more people should watch it. And I definitely think that it is something that helps you not forget.
Okay, for somebody, I normally don't watch the news. So it was kind of shocking to see the things that took place. Eye-opening, sad.
Bravery on the people who spoke out and stood up. That it's an inspiration to the country?
Well, I had watched most of it over the last couple of years, and I'm very familiar with Pastor Art, of course, in his situation. But I must say, I was really moved by the gentleman down east because I wasn't fully aware of their story. It was very emotional. And the pastor and his wife from Church on the Vine were sitting behind me. So that was kind of a treat as well. Honestly, it was great and it was very emotional, and I'm really glad we came.
To see those kids separated from their dads. You know, I say again, you Christians are different than me, because I am right now so angry, I can't even tell you.
So Ezra, you're the rebel commander. How important was it for you to sort of share this Christian story? It's something that you wouldn't expect to see in this country, maybe abroad. But how important was it to bring this to film into a one-sitting instance that people can learn the history of what happened?
Absolutely essential. And the thing about tyranny is it doesn't come announcing itself as tyranny. It doesn't wear a name tag saying, I am bad. Mm-hmm. Tyranny always comes bragging about how noble it is. And even in Nazi Germany, it was incremental, and they always said it was for some greater good. And so when we start to lose our freedom of religion, freedom of association, freedom of speech, freedom of thought in Canada, freedom of mobility, privacy, all the freedoms we started to lose, of course it was said in the common good, for your safety, it's an emergency, just suck it up. You don't need to actually go to church. You can pray from home or watch a YouTube link or whatever. Of course it's not going to identify itself as tyranny. But you have to, well, it's better to fight in the first ditch than in the last. And I think in Canada, we love Canada so much that we're tempted to say, oh, no, this was just an anomaly. You have to speak out. And you have to wake people up, and you have to let them know that they're not the only ones seeing this freedom slip away.
So I'm now joined by Pastor Artur Pawlowski, one of the pastors who endured probably some of the most aggressive treatment, spending time in solitary confinement, all of that. How important is it to have a film that sort of recaps everything, not just here in Calgary, but right across the country, the ongoing persecution and prosecution of Christian pastors that we saw?
Well, I think it's very important because we're dealing with propaganda left and right. I mean, mainstream media is not willing, refuses to tell you the entire story, what's really going on. So they always are leaning to the left, propagating what they are being told and are being paid to say. So a movie like this is super important because it shows the whole story, not just what the propaganda wants you to see, but the entire story. And when people are forced to see the whole thing, they can make, and only then they can make their own decision about what we are really dealing with.
So I am now joined by the pastors of Church in the Vine. You were among the many pastors who endured ongoing persecution, prosecution as a result of COVID-19 policies. Just how important is it, in your opinion, to have sort of this unified documentary that brings all the stories together, maybe for someone who's unfamiliar, so that they can sit down in one sitting and learn just the travesty of what happened?
That's the serious understatement of the decade. Oh my goodness, the people we talk to, that they still don't have any idea. So this is absolutely paramount. Get it out there.
And how sort of surreal was it for you? I was talking to Sheila, I've been talking to some of the other people, even with Kian, the sentiment of pastors being arrested, having their churches barred in Canada. It's something we'd complain about happening in other countries as an egregious violation. People seemed sort of passive and apathetic when it was happening to you in Edmonton, in our own backyard. What was that like for you?
Well, I'll tell you, it's something we never thought would ever happen in Canada. That's something that happens in other nations in the world, like China and North Korea. And we just never ever thought that would happen to us. And, I remember looking on Sunday mornings thinking, I wonder if it's today we're going to get arrested. And it was a constant threat for the whole time COVID was present. And so we just never would have thought.
In fact, we were so confident that we were protected through all of this. That's what we stood on. I mean, the fact that God said, continue to gather, that was the reason we gathered, but we really had absolute confidence in our Constitution, our freedom of rights here in Canada that says you cannot interrupt a religious gathering.
So I am now joined by senior producer Cian Simone. You're basically the brains behind this initiative. First off, you, myself, Sheila Gunn, lots of our team, we were on the front lines while so much of this went down. You're not just grabbing footage and editing it after the fact. How important do you think it is that you had that sort of first-hand experience? Obviously, we saw some extreme emotional reactions, all that. Do you think that was important to your process in creating this film?
Well, I think it's very important, and I kind of always start off with the whole, I'm not really Christian, I'm not religious, but when I was there, I didn't see other Christian media there. I didn't see other religious media there. It didn't matter who was there, but I do think it was important that I was there on the front lines and had that. What we would say and joke at Rebel is I got that 4K footage, right? Yeah. Like we had it all, and well, you've seen the documentaries that it was very necessary that we were all there.
Yeah. I talked with Sheila a little bit about this, but even you and I probably thinking back on the stories we covered, it's hard to even remember all the instances. You're like, when was that arrest? There's so much. How important do you think it is to sort of like consolidate it and put it into one sort of uniform movie where people can get sort of the account from beginning to end in one sit to learn about this period of sort of dark Canadian history?
Oh yeah, and it's funny, I had it all organized by date, right? Because it's just the way that I had to organize the footage, and I still got confused, and it still got mixed in, and I was still wondering. I was like, oh, is this at Pastor Tim's church or Pastor Archer's, or like? And I just obviously like I was there at both, and it was just still like a weird. I don't know how to put it. It was a weird way to think.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's yeah.
And finally, for folks out there who want to see this is obviously our world premiere, but we're going to be doing screenings right across the country. Where can people grab tickets?
People can grab tickets at SaveTheChristians.com.
I am now joined by Andy Simone. The name may give it away, but he is the father of our chief documentarian, our senior producer on this incredible film. How proud are you to sort of see the work your son is doing and to have seen him sort of on the front lines covering these stories when no one else was?
Well, obviously, I'm very, very proud, and I'm proud of all of you at Rebel for championing the cause for all of our rights. It doesn't matter. I think, despite the subject matter of this film, wherever you stand when it comes to freedom, everyone's in the same boat together, and we all need to stand together with whatever rights are being infringed upon. And this movie's a great example of what was done that not a lot of people heard about or knew that was an issue.
So I am now joined by our editor-in-chief, my boss, a woman who needs no introduction, Sheila Gunn. You are the presenter and the journalist throughout this important documentary. One of the things that I've heard you say a lot is that Christians are inclined to forgive, but we cannot forget what happened. Just how important was that as you approach this documentary?
That's exactly why we made the documentary, is that we wanted an historical record of what happened to Christian churches during the time of COVID, but to also help people understand that it didn't happen in a bubble, that the groundwork was laid starting basically from when Justin Trudeau took office, so that these attacks on Christian churches and the othering of Christians as weird or somehow dangerous to their neighbors, that was a sentiment that was sort of pervasive, and it made it really easy for governments to do the things they did to these churches, to the congregations.
Now, finally, it's interesting that you talked about this sort of horrified international audience. I think that there is a certain reality, even in talking with some Canadians, whether it be about the Freedom Convoy, whether it be about these pastors, that it wasn't as big a deal. The rest of the world, you talk to Americans, you talk to Europeans, they're like, oh my gosh, what's happening in Canada? I think some Canadians are sort of passive. What do you say to those folks who maybe aren't that familiar or seeing this interview? How do you encourage them to check this out and kind of get a real picture of what happened?
Well, that's what's important about this documentary, is it really puts into context the years leading up to the attacks on the church. And for me, as we came into COVID here in Canada, I had recently come back from northern Iraq. So I had seen the end point of these attacks on Christians. I'd come back from a place of Christian genocide, and what happened there, again, it didn't happen in a bubble. It was slow, it was creeping, until all of a sudden you find yourself in a genocide. And so, for people who are Canadians who are looking at this and saying it really wasn't a big deal, it is a big deal when you are violating the fundamental freedoms of Canadians, when you're hauling away pastors in chains. These are things that 3 years ago, 4 years ago, if we saw in Algeria, if we saw it in the Sudan, if we saw it in China, we would be mortified. Our prime minister and our provincial premiers would be issuing statements of outrage and quickly, they were the ones doing it here.
And so how important do you think it is? You guys obviously, whether it be the comedy you do, whether it be sort of the podcasts, your engagement within society, you've definitely got your sort of finger on the pulse of society. How important is it for maybe some Canadians who don't know what these pastors went through, don't know what the truckers went through throughout COVID-19, to check out a movie like this?
From experience in Coots, I can say I would probably believe a lot of what I would see on the news. If I saw, 3 of these guys sideswiped a police officer on Highway 2, I'd go, wow, these guys are insane. And I'd flip to the next channel. And then just by luck of actually being down there myself and seeing how those people in particular actually behaved. They wouldn't even have open liquor. They were just, they dotted their I's, crossed their T's, man. And it was a complete lie, man. So this is another field of that. So certainly it's going to uncover some truth that you won't see in the mainstream.
Well, that is a wrap from Canyon Meadows Cinemas here in Calgary, Alberta. It was a greatly successful world premiere of our Church Under Fire documentary. It was great to speak to so many people who were intimately involved in the story and were there experiencing firsthand the ongoing prosecution and persecution of Christians in this country throughout COVID-19. As always, I want to thank you all so much for tuning in. For Rebel News, I'm Adam Sos. Well, this was the world premiere of our documentary. We are doing screenings right across this country over the coming month to ensure that you get your tickets, because these tickets are going fast. Go to savethechristians.ca. Get your tickets now. Come and support this important initiative and make sure that folks never forget what happened throughout COVID-19. Again, that URL is savethechristians.ca.